At 3:30 p.m. local time in the Caribbean Sea, the silence was suddenly shattered by the roar of jet engines. Two Venezuelan Air Force F-16 Fighting Falcons flew low, cutting through the air just a few hundred feet above the waves. But this time, their target wasn't a smuggling vessel or a mere training ground. Before them stood the USS Jason Dunham, a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, equipped with sophisticated sensors and a deadly missile system. On the ship's radar screen, flashes of light marked the closing distance. The bridge crew knew full well what was happening. This wasn't just another airborne flight. This was a provocation, a dangerous showdown. But this time, the game involved supersonic jets and billions of dollars in military hardware. The Pentagon later called the action reckless, a high-risk maneuver that could trigger a fatal misunderstanding. Foreign media described the incident as the second such action in 2 consecutive days by Venezuelan jets. But to the sailors on the destroyer, the labels didn't matter. All they knew was that 2 Cold War-era fighter jets were hurtling toward them, their incendiary lights blazing like torches in the Caribbean sky. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro wanted to project strength, a strong message to Washington that Caracas would not be intimidated. A few days earlier, a speedboat suspected of being used by the cartel was sunk in an operation involving the United States. Maduro saw that as an excuse to retaliate. However, by choosing this approach, his pilots would soon learn, intimidation doesn't work in one direction. They thought they were sending a strong message. But what they didn't realize was that they were actually giving the U.S. Navy a priceless golden opportunity. On the destroyer USS Jason Dunham, every sailor knew exactly what to do. Standard procedure, a drill repeated thousands of times. Stay calm, stay on course, let the multi-layered defense speak. The first step was a radio warning. The calm voice of the U.S. communications officer came over an open frequency, unidentified aircraft. You are approaching a U.S. warship operating in international waters. Please maintain a safe distance. The message was simple, clear, and professional. But would the Venezuelan pilots comply or push the boundaries even further? Tensions in the Caribbean Sea were heating up. One wrong move and a small spark could turn into a full-blown inferno. The Venezuelan pilots didn't respond. Instead, one of them turned on the afterburners, streaking over the ship's bow in a blinding orange flame. But in the ship's combat information center, the real battle had begun long before the jets were visible to the naked eye. The AN/SPY-1 radar, the heart of the Aegis combat system, had been tracking the jet's arrival for a long time. Data streamed across the console screens. Altitude, speed, direction, all recorded in real time. The weapons officers immediately activated the ship's defenses. From SM-2 missiles in the vertical launch cells to RIM-162C Sparrow missiles for close-in attacks. And the final line of defense, the Phalanx Gatling gun, capable of unleashing thousands of rounds in a matter of seconds. If the Venezuelan pilots made a wrong move, this ship could take them out in an instant. But the goal wasn't to shoot. The captain remained calm, his arms folded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The orders were clear. Do not escalate, unless the ship was under a real, direct threat. The Jason Dunham was operating in international waters, perfectly legal to be there. The real danger wasn't the jet itself, but the risk that one small mistake could escalate into a global incident. From the deck, sailors looked up as a second F-16 roared low, so close that its shadow briefly crossed the missile hatch. To the untrained eye, it looked as if Venezuela had won the intimidation game. But in reality, it was quite the opposite. Every pilot's radio transmission back to Caracas, every radar echo, every blip on their targeting system, all captured by the Jason Dunham's electronic warfare equipment. The closer they flew, the more information they revealed. What was thought to be a show of force turned out to be a data trap for the Americans. The USS Jason Dunham was no ordinary ship. She was an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, essentially a floating fortress. Her AN/SPY-1 radar can track hundreds of objects simultaneously, from ballistic missiles to high-altitude fighter jets. For the crew of the Jason Dunham, 2 F-16 jets roaring low were a minor annoyance compared to the real threat this ship was designed to confront. On the surface, it appeared as if Caracas was exerting pressure. But behind the scenes, Washington was amassing a valuable intelligence advantage. The airborne flight may have seemed like a charade, but Washington wasn't laughing. Within hours, the Pentagon called the incident provocative and reckless. President Donald Trump reiterated his message. Any Venezuelan aircraft threatening U.S. ships would be shot down. Days later, 10 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter jets arrived in Puerto Rico, just a 2-hour flight from Venezuelan airspace. These weren't vintage aircraft from the 1980s, but the crown jewel of American technology. Fifth-generation aircraft designed to penetrate radar and disable adversaries before they even raise alarm. Their presence was a clear signal. If Caracas wanted to gamble in the skies, the stakes were now much higher. And Jason Dunham wasn't alone. Behind him stood the full might of a U.S. Navy task force. Destroyers, cruisers, supply ships, and even amphibious ships carrying Marines. In the air, P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft watched the sea, while high-altitude drones stared in the distance. A single ship may appear alone on the horizon. In reality, it was part of a multi-layered shield stretching across the Caribbean. The contrast is brutal. F-16s can roar, they can be a nuisance, but they can't change the facts. The Venezuelan Air Force lacks modern missiles, lacks stealth capabilities, and is logistically fragile. Even if they wanted to, matching American air power is impossible.
Pretend I'm not here, guys. Don't worry about it.
And truck tattoo, you always have to know that.
Knock you on top of